How did F1 go from looking like this to this?
But he's forcing a defensive shape, as in the background, Hamilton and Perez go very close, but this is for the lead.
F1 officially started in 1946, but in reality, it started much earlier. Back in 1894, the first ever motor race was held between Paris and Rouen, and the idea of a championship was formed, but it would take another 50 years before they finally set up the Formula One. Back then, they didn't have the stupid DRS or budget caps, just a bunch of privately owned teams racing for the love of the game. Though the cars they used were not so great back then, with little regard to aerodynamics and driver safety. Back then, there used to be a lot of mechanical failures, and few talented drivers like Sterling Moss and Cameron Earl lost their lives due to random failures. Most of these failures were fatal, with little to no guarantee that the car would not just break down in the middle of the race. So I guess the early period was not that nice. However, this didn't stop drivers from across Europe to join the race, and a governing body was set up known as the FIA, or the Federal International de Automobile. Among them was the Italian Giuseppe Farina, who would go on to become the first ever world champion in a sport that was just beginning to take off. Naturally, you'd think an Italian driver would be behind the wheel of an Italian car, right? Well, before you guess a brand starting with an F, let me tell you that wasn't the case. Farina became champion driving a supercharged 1.5-liter Alfetta 158. In those early years, it was the Italians from Alfa Romeo and Ferrari who were dominating with their old-fashioned front-engine designs. But because of that, the FIA soon realized that the World Championship was getting a bit boring for the fans. So, in 1954, they changed the rules to shake things up, which eventually led to the emergence of a team from far-off Germany. And by the way, they weren't exactly best friends with the Italians at the time, because of a crazy failed painter who tried to take over the world. The team was Mercedes, and they quickly started dominating with a speedy Argentine driver named Juan Manuel Fangio. But just when things seemed to be going well, the worst tragedy in racing history happened: the 1955 Le Mans disaster. It was the deadliest accident in motorsport history. 84 people lost their lives, including the Mercedes driver Pierre Levesque, whose car exploded in a fireball. Turns out, some components of the car were made of a highly flammable magnesium alloy. Although technically no one was held responsible, Mercedes decided to completely withdraw from racing for 30 years. Talk about drama. But just because Mercedes fell behind, it didn't mean we did too. By the late 50s, a new revolution was underway, out with the old Ferrari and Alfa cars, and in with new ideas. And man, did bold ideas come, especially from the UK, where people loved one thing more than tea in the Royals: dominating the world of motorsport. The Brits developed those incredible cars with the engine mounted in the middle, leaving behind the pre-war Italian designs. It was a fresh and thrilling approach that finally allowed them to shake off their reputation as losers and start winning championships. This led to an impressive 5 new world titles for British drivers. The category also started expanding internationally with new races in Canada, the United States, Mexico, and South Africa. And to top it off, 2 small but ambitious private teams named McLaren and Williams decided to build their own cars. Who did they think they were? By the 1970s, Formula One had become an incredibly expensive sport, largely due to constant rule changes aimed at making races safer and preventing drivers from dying in accidents. However, teams came up with a clever solution. They allowed brands to advertise during races in exchange for hefty sponsorship fees. They seized this opportunity to advertise anything from condoms to cigarettes, and even musical groups. Sponsorships became so crucial that today's cars look like a teenager's notebook covered in logos and designs. By the 1970s, being an F1 constructor was a grueling challenge, worse than navigating through 7 circles of hell. The races spanned more than 5 continents, which was nearly impossible for small private teams to manage. Each circuit tightly controlled advertising and prize money for their individual Grand Prix events. The governing body, FISA, ruled with an iron fist, dictating all the rules, regulations, and commercial rights with the strictness of a colonel sergeant. So, a good man with a good idea, Bernie Ecclestone, formed the Formula One Constructors Association, which leveled the playing field by kicking off the ground effect era, a period of big technical changes that introduced side skirts. During that time, there was a Brazilian named Nelson Piquet who was winning championships left and right. But there were also a couple of newbies in town who were about to make everyone sit up and take notice. I'm talking about Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost, who began their rapid rise in F1 during the mid-80s. It was simply crazy to see them dominate the championships in 1985 and 1986 with McLaren. Too bad that duo turned into a real dogfight for 10 long years. Now, we reached 1992, and the Williams team, in a stroke of genius, or maybe madness, develops technology that leaves their rivals in the dust on the track. Active suspension, perfect for dominating the competition. In 1992 and 1993, Nigel Mansell and Alain Prost ruled the circuits, winning titles effortlessly. But then, in 1994, things got even more exciting. The legendary Senna, after leaving McLaren, moved to Williams to replace the recently retired Prost. Meanwhile, Michael Schumacher finally had a competitive car with Benetton ready to leave his mark on the asphalt. And let's not forget Ferrari, hoping for redemption with German aces Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi behind the wheel. However, as you know, fortune can be cruel. In the tragic San Marino Grand Prix of 1994, disaster struck with unimaginable force. Within 2 days, 2 lives were lost on these cursed Imola tracks. First, Roland Ratzenberger died in a crash during qualifying. Then, 3-time champion Ayrton Senna suffered a fatal steering failure at nearly 200 miles per hour, crashing devastatingly at the treacherous Tamburello corner. It was such a devastating blow that even the FIA had to acknowledge that their cars weren't as safe as they thought. But let's not forget that the tragedy didn't completely overshadow the true spirit of racing in that tumultuous year. Despite the mourning at Imola, an intense battle worthy of the greatest warriors was still unfolding on the tracks. Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill engaged in a titanic duel for the crown. These two fierce competitors left nothing on the asphalt, fighting for every inch of track. Lap after lap, they were neck and neck, pushing the limits at every turn, every braking zone, every overtake. The tension was palpable as they reached the final race in Australia. A single point would decide the fate of an entire year of sweat and oil. And to add to the drama, the finale was quite controversial. Schumacher and Hill collided in an incident that some believe was deliberate on Schumacher's part to secure his first world title. Some saw it as a brilliant strategic move, while others condemned it as unforgivable. But in the end, no action was taken against the controversial Schumi. Leaving all that drama behind, welcome to the new millennium and a fresh era in Formula One. The World Championship crown is in the hands of McLaren and the Finnish driver Mika Häkkinen. Meanwhile, Michael Schumacher is chasing his first title with Ferrari and 3rd overall. Oh, and F1 cars sound different now with the introduction of V10 engines. A delight for noise enthusiasts, a headache for the neighbors. At that time, no driver had won more than 2 consecutive titles in over 4 decades. But Ferrari and Schumacher were about to rewrite history, and as you might know by now, they did. They secured 5 consecutive championships, including 2 thrilling battles for the title against Häkkinen and Kimi Räikkönen, the other Finnish driver. But he looks like he's straight out of a video game. For 3 years, they dominated the track like asphalt kings. In 2002, Ferrari ended the season with the same number of points as all the other teams combined. Meanwhile, Renault had a secret weapon, Fernando Alonso, a young Spanish driver defying physics behind the wheel. This guy was ready to break Ferrari's streak of 5 consecutive titles. It was time someone knocked the Kaiser Schumacher off his throne, right? But in 2007, McLaren wanted to reclaim their dominance and came up with a plan as brilliant as it was crazy. They signed the defending champion Alonso and a rookie, thinking there would be no internal competition. What could go wrong? Spoiler alerts, everything. Well, McLaren made a big mistake by not just signing any rookie, but Lewis Hamilton. He raced like a seasoned pro from day one, sparking debates and controversies within the team. As if that wasn't enough, the Spygate scandal hit McLaren when they were fined 100 million euros for having confidential Ferrari documents. And in an ironic twist, Ferrari themselves ultimately took the championship with Kimi Räikkönen, although Hamilton would eventually win the following year with a last-minute move. Then came 2009, a year that Formula One remembers fondly because of a major rule change by the FIA. Braun GP took full advantage of these rules to create a dominant car, propelling Jenson Button to the title before the other teams with bigger budgets could catch up. In early 2010, Red Bull gave wings, damn straight, to the young Sebastian Vettel, allowing the German to clinch 4 consecutive world titles. Some of these championship battles were incredibly close, while in other seasons, Vettel dominated decisively. Then in 2014, Mercedes introduced the first hybrid turbo engine in history. Their car boasted supreme aerodynamics and phenomenal engine power, leaving competitors in the dust for years. Did someone say unfair advantage? Although this unleashed a civil war between their drivers, Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, in a rivalry worthy of the best movies. Two gladiators in the Formula One circus. They traded championships and dominated the grid for 3 years until Rosberg retired in 2016. Next came the era of Lewis Hamilton's dominance. He clinched 4 more titles, with Mercedes reigning supreme over Formula One until the end of the turbo hybrid era in 2021. This period witnessed one of the closest and most grueling championship battles in history against Max Verstappen. Their competition was so intense that on some days Verstappen was ahead, on others it was Hamilton, and sometimes they were neck and neck, almost literally. The championship was decided in the final race in Abu Dhabi, marked by several accidents, controversies, and Verstappen becoming champion after starting from pole position. The 2022 season brought new rules, and Max broke another record by winning 15 races for his second title. And in 2023, well, we all know what happened. Another year of Verstappen dominance, further boosting his numbers. It seems like this man never tires out. More recently, on the 20th anniversary of the Chinese Grand Prix's return, the unstoppable Max Verstappen once again triumphed in Asia. He dominated the race from start to finish, despite numerous incidents and worrying tire issues that had many fans on the edge of their seats. The reigning champion defended his pole position like a lion protecting its territory, securing his 58th victory in the top tier of racing. And that's it for now. It's been a long journey from those early races in Paris. Have I covered every important driver and event? Probably not, but I gave it my best shot. So, you know what to do. Leave a like and subscribe for more.